All right, today we're breaking down the framework from the pretty controversial work, The Game of Firmness in Seduction. We're going to walk through its three-act structure to really get a handle on the psychological system it claims can, guarantee results.
Okay, let's just dive right in with this one. The entire philosophy is really built on these kinds of provocative statements. It frames seduction less as a two-way street and more like a game where the man leads, and the only proof that she's interested is if she shows absolute compliance.
So, where does this so-called game even begin? Well, according to this framework, it actually kicks off before a single word is ever spoken. It all starts with this fundamental biological test that supposedly decides if an interaction is even possible.
And they have a name for this, el volado, which means the genetic coin toss. It's positioned as the absolute non-negotiable first step. It's a simple pass-or-fail test that's totally out of your conscious control, all based on subconscious signals like pheromone.
The framework boils this whole critical volado moment down into three really distinct stages. First, you have the approach, then there's a subconscious exchange of pheromones, and finally, you get the woman's involuntary facial reaction, which supposedly tells you the result of the coin toss.
Now, what's really striking here is just how black and white the outcome is. There's zero middle ground. According to this thinking, her immediate, almost imperceptible reaction is the one and only signal you need. It tells you whether to move on to the next stage or to just walk away right then and there.
And really, this all boils down to one simple thing: efficiency. The framework is super clear on this. If that initial biological test is a fail, any more effort on your part is a complete and total waste of time. It actually argues that the most important skill is learning to spot a loss and just move on.
But okay, what if you win the coin toss? What happens then? Well, that's when the source says the actual game finally starts. And this whole second act is built around one single idea: creating and managing tension.
This quote right here really gets to the heart of the game's mechanic. Seduction is compared to a stretched rubber band. The whole idea is to maintain your own cool while you increase the tension, basically waiting for the other person to get uncomfortable and break first.
And here you can really see the incredibly rigid gender dynamics this is all built on. The man's role is all about firmeza, or firmness. He has to lead, he has to set the direction, and a big part of that is being able to say no. Meanwhile, the woman's role is bondad, or kindness, which is shown by agreeing, by saying yes, basically by complying.
So how exactly are you supposed to build all this tension? Well, the framework literally gives you a playbook of tactics. It starts with using the power of no to establish control. Then it moves into what it calls status games to establish dominance. And it even includes some pretty manipulative moves, like talking about another woman just to make her feel competitive.
All right, let's move on to the final act and see how this all comes together. So, assuming you've successfully created that tension, the game then shifts into a longer-term strategy. This whole phase is about creating distance and kind of controlling the narrative from afar. Now, this is a core belief of this whole philosophy. The idea of creating distance isn't seen as a risk, like you might lose her interest. No, it's seen as an absolute requirement for her attraction to grow. The thinking is that your absence is actually way more powerful than your presence. And they've even got a specific name for this: the Amazon technique. It's basically a rule-based system for strategic waiting. The logic goes that by purposefully not answering her messages for a set amount of time, a guy demonstrates that firmeza we talked about in Act 2, and it just cranks up her interest through that prolonged tension. And this is where the advice gets, well, pretty elaborate. It lays out these multi-step routines that it calls spells. These complex, almost ritualistic sequences of actions seem designed to make that waiting period easier for the man to get through, by giving him a checklist of things to do instead of just focusing on his own impatience.
So what's supposed to be happening while you're creating all this manufactured distance? The source claims that this is exactly when the woman kicks into her research phase. She's supposedly going to use this time to investigate the guy to figure out his value and his status.
What this really means is that a guy's online presence has to be meticulously curated to pass her test. It needs to project value, showing he's mastered a skill, has social proof from other women, and is on an upward trajectory. And at the same time, any of these so-called red flags, like leaving needy comments on other people's photos, will get him disqualified immediately. So when you step back and look at this entire 3x structure, from the biological coin toss to the tension games, all the way to the strategic waiting, it really leaves us with one fundamental question. Is what we're looking at here a manual for seduction, or is it a playbook for manipulation?